Okay. Yo.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're here. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good day. Good day. How are you? How are you? What's going on? I am Himyo, and welcome to the human experience. This is going to be a new forum in where I am going to engage individuals that I come across who I see that are impactful and doing wonderful things for the community. And the human experience is going to be an opportunity for these individuals to compassionately express themselves so that you, the viewers, can experience the compassion that resides in these individuals. And so we are going to do this by asking them 7 questions that are going to allow them to emote what it is that makes them so dynamic. And especially here with King Conscious, we are looking to show our youth, our African American youth around the world, that there are a lot of dynamic black men that are out there who are willing to take on the extra responsibility to help them become the most endearing and dynamic beings that we were born to be. And so that is what King Conscious is all about, and that is what we are here to do. And on this version of the human experience, we have an individual who is choosing to take on one of those roles, and as y'all may or may not know, this August we will be having a King's Conscious conference that is going to be in the virtual realm, where we are going to bring together our mentors and our mentees and have a dynamic, transforming experience for all parties involved. And so the individual that I am about to bring to you all is a man I met. What is it? Maybe about a year, 2 years ago. About that, he was throwing an event with a collective of individuals, and we just were able to bond and come together. And I saw that there was a very bright light in this individual, and he has a lot to offer the world. And so, with no further ado, I would like to introduce the human experience audience to a gentleman by the name of Enrico Moses.
Yes. Thank you, Himyo, for having me on this program. And just, it was, I remember meeting you at that event, and I reflect that feeling of the light that you have within yourself. And I'm honored to be here today. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you. It is not a problem. It is my pleasure and it is my honor, good brother. And so please let the world know who Enrico Moses is and what you bring to the world.
Such a large question. But at the core, I'm a human. I'm a black man. I'm come from descendants of Native American, Jewish, and African American descendants. My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and my descendants escaped from slavery, and once they were free of the bondage of slavery, they chose to change their name to Moses, and that's how I ended up getting my name. But I grew up in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, in the northwest suburbs of Minneapolis, and I was just an American, I would say American young boy turning into an American man, looking for my own way. Heavily influenced by hip hop and culture and the things that were around me. I was definitely very influenced by sports. And as I'm watching this Jordan documentary, is really bringing me back to my childhood and this competitive nature that I had within me. I grew up with two younger siblings, a younger sister, a younger brother, and we always had that competitive spirit and that competitive drive together. So that's a big part of who I am as far as at my core. and I've always been interested in the cultures. I've always been very heavily influenced by fashion at an early age. I feel like I knew I wanted to be a fashion designer by that time. I was probably 6 or 7. So that really shaped my upbringing. I ended up going to college, studying apparel design, and ended up switching that into retail merchandising and management. And from that place, I ended up actually dropping out of school when I started my own clothing line. I ended up opening my own store and running that store for about 3 years, which kind of became my makeup MBA. I was managing a team of people, traveling the country, buying for my store, doing the marketing, and figuring out like how to build a community. I think looking back at that experience, I was 23 when I opened my store, and a lot of it was like I wanted to create a place where people felt comfortable, that people felt like they could come, they could shop, they could browse what was going on. My store was selling mixtapes at the time. That was a really big thing. We were selling DVDs, we're selling magazines, we're selling T-shirts, we're selling accessories, denim, shoes, sunglasses. So I really always like thought about it in a way like I want like a young person to be able to come into my store. Maybe they only have $5 in their pocket. I want them to feel like they can come and be a part of this community and buy into this community. And if someone comes in here with thousands of dollars in their pocket, I want them to know like there's something there for them too. So, and that came out of my reflection of just being younger and feeling like people didn't want me in their store, like feeling that energy of like, I'm not really welcome here and my money wasn't welcome here. And I always really just like remembered that. And so that store became my first community, and people would come and would chop it up for hours, and we would just build on culture. I was selling all these DVDs that's, some of the Smacks and Don Divas and,
the bootleg man in the hood.
and I was actually getting them from the distributors out in New York, but like really just I can't say there wasn't no bootlegging going on as far as the mixtape game, but that's definitely what that era was about, was like spreading information. You had the mixtape Wheezy, but you also just had that was before really YouTube was real big, and so that's where people were coming to find like more information out about, we're talking about fake news now in 2020, but the Black community has known, nothing but fake news. I would say our whole lives. So we've always been searching for real information and for some form of the truth. So, just coming up and, building relationships like with the Come Up and Fendi and Nicki Minaj calling me on my line. And, so these things were like building me into the culture, traveling out to Vegas. I'll be meeting like people like Russell Simmons. I'm meeting folks like Rev Run, and they're starting to like give me some of the game. This is what I've done. This is what you should be doing. And so those things just really impacted me as someone growing up from Minneapolis. Just like there's a bigger world out here, and what do I want to do next? And so when the recession happened in 2009, I knew it was like Minnesota has given me everything that it can offer, and it's time for me to expand and to, fly and grow my wings a little bit more. So I knew it was either going to be New York or LA. I kind of split up the two, saw what I liked about both, and I realized like LA was really the place for me and the things that I liked about LA. So I ended up moving out here with a good friend of mine. We drove out here in my Land Rover, and I was living with another homie out in Inglewood, and just like getting my bearings. I had a small store when I first moved out here in downtown LA, like in the fashion district. Like I was selling DVDs, I was selling watches and things that I'm getting from New York, and I'm realizing they don't have some of this stuff out here in LA. And so just like starting to figure out like what does it look like for me to be an entrepreneur out here, because my whole plan was to create another store. I shut down my store in Minneapolis, and I was like, I'm going to reopen my store out here in LA. And I started really figuring out that LA wasn't going to be it wasn't going to be the place I can create the same store that I had in Minneapolis. It was like I had to reevaluate what I was going to create. And so that just led me to I was working at a showroom, still just like furthering my fashion career. I ended up getting hired as a brand manager for this clothing line. And then that led me to starting this idea and this concept with a homie of mine who became my co-founder, called FIDU. Stands for Fashion Information Distribution Organized Online. And that was like my first real step into the tech world. We raised a couple $100,000, and I was really in charge of building this product and bringing people together through the marketing, the digital marketing, social media. This is when Twitter was first getting started, Instagram was first getting started. So I'm really like knee deep in the understanding of like how big this new form of marketing, this new form of content is going to be. So that really shaped who I am today, because I utilize these platforms to build myself as a public speaker, as an organizer, as a community leader, as a DJ and an artist. So, that kind of brought me to doing some consulting. I started consulting people in fashion, in startup world, as far as in the realms of digital marketing, how to utilize their digital marketing to grow their brand, to bring them to a new place in their business. I met my partner and we became business partners. She's also the mother of my beautiful 4-year-old daughter. And we started some businesses together. So I've been really in the last 10 years out here in LA. I've had several businesses. And through those businesses, I feel like I was being challenged personally. I was in a business relationship and personal relationship with my partner. So it was just like being challenged in that way made me start diving deeper into how can I communicate better, and like what's going on with my emotions. Like I'll be getting triggered. I noticed she was getting triggered. So that led me to my personal growth and development, really like diving into that realm about 7 years ago when I joined a nonprofit called the Mankind Project. And so that there's a lot of things that led from the Mankind Project to now. But I would say, right now, about 6 months ago, from the things I've learned from that organization and another organization called Insight, and there's another organization called Landmark, and just taking these courses, these trainings.
I know about Landmark. I went through that first course, the first half of it, for sure.
Yeah,
So
my business partner went through it. He actually met his wife there, and it's been super impactful for him. And I know a lot of the learnings, they're integrated in so many different ways in some of these organizations.
Right.
But yeah, so that led us to starting a company together that now I'm running, called Zen House. And that was doing the work that I met you, bringing people together and learning more about our emotional intelligence and really just understanding how to step into our true, authentic selves, learning what's going on with our emotions and, building community.
So that's amazing, so through all of the combination of experiences that started out in Minneapolis and how that helped to propel you and to when you got here in Los Angeles and the experience of being in Los Angeles and putting all of those things together allowed you to once again be where you are today, and that actually is a great precursor for the first question that I have for you, which is, what do you trust more, your heart or your brain?
Whew. That's a question I've never really thought about. I think that my answer is neither. I think that we've talked about this before, but at my core, I'm somewhat of a Taoist, and so I look at things less of what's better or worse or good or bad, and I try to understand the is of it. What is it? And so when I think about my brain or my heart, it's like, well, what is my brain doing? Like, what is that function? And then it's like my heart has a different function. It's like, what is that function? And as well, for me, it's like my stomach is another big part of my decision making process. Like I feel things in my stomach, and so it's like for me, I would say they're all equally as important, and I try to be mindful of them because in the past I might think, well, what is my brain thinking, and I forget about my heart, or I don't listen to my heart, or I don't listen to my stomach. So I would say I just try to find balance and understand like what's my heart saying, and does that match up with what my brain's saying? Like, is there? I try to find a balance in those, an equilibrium in what my heart, my stomach, and what my brain is saying.
All right, so it's a more of a how well they all work together and align in order for you to move forward with XYZ choice that you have in front of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting one for sure, for sure. And so the next question we have for you is um, is it better to have beauty or be beautiful?
So again, we're going to the better or worse. So similarly, it's going to be an and. I think there. You said to be beauty.
Is it
Can you
better to have beauty or be beautiful?
have beauty or to be beautiful? I mean, I think they kind of work together for me. I think that beauty is a form of love and compassion. I think that a lot of beauty to me comes from this intention around love and compassion. And to be beautiful, I think, is also a part of like a resonation, a resonance of that being. And I think about music, like beautiful music to me can happen anywhere, right? So like anybody can do it, I think randomly. But when I listen to somebody like Prince when he played, I'm like, this man is so tuned into beauty. He can just pick up a guitar and beautiful notes play. And to me, that's about him understanding the harmony and understanding the science underneath the music, which is him embodying the beauty, and then I look at it and it is beautiful. So I think they're both tied together in that way.
Hmm. Now, that question is, I believe, at the heart of it is the distinction between having something and being something, right? And how and how in that distinction, you can have something and you could always be having it with you, and it could be near you and all of that. But if you're not being that, then that's just something else that you're taking with you that's taking up space, right? And
Yeah, and the way I think about it is kind of like I can say something, I can say words, but there's a big difference between me saying words and me meaning what I say.
hmm
You see what I'm saying? Like I could say a prayer, know the prayer, I could memorize the prayer, but there's a difference between like me understanding that prayer and really believing in that prayer. And so I think that's how I would distinct those two.
hmm hmm Okay. Now, so then that leads to pregunta numero tres,
Mhm.
which is,
CC.
um, which is, uh, when is the last time that you cried?
Man, probably 20 minutes ago. I'm an emotional being. Yeah, I'm an emotional being, and I was thinking about life and death, and I was thinking about, man, honestly, I was thinking about this Michael Jordan documentary I've been watching, and I was thinking about when I remember him going from basketball to baseball as a viewer, as a fan. I remember the narrative I remember was like, man, Michael Jordan's quitting when he's on top because he feels like there's nothing more for him to do, and he's going to go dominate baseball because he's just that bad. Like he's just such like dominant person that's what he's about to do, and then it was like, oh, he failed, he's not some superhuman, it just felt like that was a narrative. And watching this documentary, I'm realizing that he was going through so much emotional trauma because of his father being killed. And it's just, I don't remember that being a part of the narrative. And I just think about like, and when he said in the documentary, like he just wanted to be considered one of the guys like that. I was thinking about that this morning, and it broke me down just thinking about his pain and how close he was to his father. It's so beautiful to me, because to me, sadness and love are so interconnected. And he felt so much love for his father because his father was so there for him, in this way that he was, that I don't understand. I'm just watching it from the outside. And I just think it's a beautiful love story. I think the story between Michael Jordan and his father is it's a beautiful story, and it ended in a tragedy, which is almost a part of the beauty, in this weird paradoxical way. So brought me to tears.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because like tapping into my feelings such as those, like it's been a long time since I cried, right? Um, but there's been feelings, I've been having feelings of wanting to cry. Like even just last week, right? We had something very tragic happen within my life, and my partner, she miscarried, and
Sorry to hear
and
that.
so we lost this life that was about to be coming into the world, and it was a son, and so you know when this whole situation is transpiring amongst us, and it was just like I just remember feeling like, yo, I can't cry. Like there was some guilt that was actually that's attached to that, to like, damn, you know what I mean? Like we just went through this very traumatic experience. I want to cry, but I can't cry, and feeling like, yo, what is wrong with me to where to like have this traumatic experience happen, and me not being able to express myself, or to release some of that through the expression of crying, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was just like, and I don't feel like that is attached to the common misnomer that is placed on being a male, and then especially being a black male, right? And where we're kind of taught, or where it's strongly encouraged for us to not let our feelings out in that particular manner, right? And
Mm-hmm.
as far as the crying aspect, right? And
Mm-hmm.
not being okay with that. Like I don't recall that being something that has been that was like constantly seeped into my consciousness, but but through being a part of that, right? I think I did probably ingest that misnomer, like, yo, it's not cool to cry. Like the last time I really remember like crying, it was maybe like a couple of years back when it's like I just my dad passing, who passed when I was 12, but there was me not being able to remember like the specific date that he passed, and then like being called and by a family member, and like, yo, today is the day that daddy passed and daughter this, and I'm like, damn, I didn't even remember that, you know what I mean? And like, and the fact of that I didn't remember it is the feeling that made me cry, you know what I mean? And it was just
Mm-hmm.
so uh, and then after that, I don't remember being able to do that, and wanting to really do that, but just not being attached enough to my emotions to be able to let that out as a valve and a trigger, you know.
I, I think the subject is really deep, and I mean, thank you for sharing that. I'm really sorry for your loss and
Mhm.
for your partner's loss.
Yeah, it's an hour loss because that was also one thing that I tried to I wanted to take on as well. Like, yes, she physically went through that experience, um, but that's not separate that's not just her thing. You know what I mean? It was a
Hmm.
we thing, and I consciously remember being like toggling back and forth with that, and like, yo, all right, no, we miscarried. She didn't
Hmm.
miscarry. Like, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so that way to be able to try to support her as much as possible and not allow her to feel blamed for the large bearing of responsibility for what happened. You know what I mean? Because we're in this together.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes back to the stories that we tell ourselves. When we're talking about crying, I would invite you to ask yourself the question: what story do I tell myself about crying? What is my belief that I personally believe about crying? Like, if I cry, what does that say about me? If I
Mm-hmm.
see other men crying, what does that say about them? And just to really meditate and ask yourself, what stories were you taught about crying? Because that's one of the things that can begin to deprogram whatever that program is. Because I don't know. I think we're all unique in that way, that we all get told different stories.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, my ability to tap into that emotion, it's like two-sided, because like I was very close with my mother. She, raised by my mother, and felt safe to be emotional. And then when my father got into the picture, he, he wanted to toughen me up. And I feel like, as a father looking back now, what I realize is like, children use crying as a form of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for my father for, like, he kind of like got that out of me. He did it in the way that he did it, and at the time there was some violence involved in it, but I know it was very compassionate, and I know he wasn't doing it to be mean or anything. I think that there is uh I think there's a not really positive way to like use crying. I think some people use crying to play this victim role because they want to feel loved and they
Mm-hmm.
want to feel
Mm-hmm.
comforted. And so there's all, like I said, there's all these different stories that we tell ourselves about crying. And for me, I think it's vulnerable. I think vulnerability is powerful, and feeling is really that's where we tap into our power. And so that's why I'm comfortable. Like, you've actually seen me crying in front of a room full of men, and I wasn't always like that. There's times in my life where it's like that would have never happened, but
Mm-hmm.
I've reprogrammed myself to realize that me crying is actually showing my strength, because I'm not sitting here just like, you're not going to see me in a business meeting just breaking down crying. There's definitely a time and a place for that, and when I feel like that safe space is there, then I allow myself to feel fully.
There's something in that you touched upon. Like, so right now, I'm reading this book, All About Love, New Visions by Bell Hooks, right?
Mhm.
And in that book, the beginning part of it talks about, defining what love is, right? And so the thing that made me think back to that, when you were talking about how your dad was trying to get the crying out of you, and he used it in a compassionate and loving way, and there was some violence involved in that, right? But it
Mhm.
was from a loving, um, from what you felt is like a loving standpoint, right?
Mhm.
And like, in the book, what she was talking about in defining what love is, right? As we're taught that love is a person, place, or a thing, right? Most people are taught that that's what love is. It's a noun, right? As opposed to
Mhm.
love being a verb, right?
Mhm.
And within that, um, when you talk about love from that particular standpoint, she defined it as a love. Love would be defined as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own and another's spiritual growth, right? And that love has a mixture of ingredients within it. And those
Mhm.
ingredients being care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, trust, honesty, and open communication, right? Like, so these things that we are able to like to enact or to be towards someone, right? As opposed to it just being attached to, and so with that, these being these actions, like violence is not a form of love, right?
Hmm.
Although we are conditioned to think that, like, when you get a beating or you beat your kids, like, oh, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, and this act of getting this beating to form as a form of correction and as a form of love, you know is kind of a misnomer, you know.
Yeah, can and so this is such a it's a very abstract concept, and I think de-abstracting it is very, very complicated. And I don't act like I have the answers.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I think that so in reading the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall, was it Rosenberg? I think something like that. Sorry if I fucked that up because that book is
All good.
amazing. But nonviolent communication, there's a chapter that talks about the need for violence based on ignorance. And so it's a really interesting concept. So here's how this plays out. Just like a child, let's say my child doesn't want to brush her teeth, right? And so she has a hard no, right? What her want is I'm requesting for her to brush her teeth. Her answer to that is no, I don't want to brush my teeth, right? So
Mm,
as a parent, to oppose her no is a form of violence, right? Because it's like I'm I'm forcing you to do something you don't want to do. And so in that act, that's actually a form of violence,
mm,
right? In itself. And sometimes we have to look at the world in the sense of like, when is violence necessary? And so I think that in my father's kind of what was happening, whether it was like just a spanking or a belt or whatever, it's like, to the degree, I think violence is a spectrum, right? Violence could
mm,
be yelling at someone. Violence is judgment. Violence is actually comparing, right? If I say this restaurant is better than that restaurant, that's actually a form of violence, right? And so there's a spectrum of what violence is and how
mm,
how that violence impacts someone, right? I might be like, well, the spanking impacted me because there was a physical form of violence, and there's this connection now of like a fear of men, or so there's impacts of that. So there's a whole abstraction of this concept of violence and of love,
mm,
because that violence is seen as a form of love. When I go past my daughter's no and I'm saying, guess what, you're brushing your teeth, that's actually a deep form of love for my daughter, because she's in a place of ignorance, of understanding why I want her to brush her teeth.
mm,
You see what I'm saying? And kind of like that form of ignorance of like, why is it not healthy for me to cry to get what I want, and to learn how to communicate to get what I want? Could there have been maybe a better way to teach that? Possibly. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
for sure.
probably. But I think that just going back to the compassion is like, I'm gonna assume he did it the best way he knew how, right? And
Hmm,
so
hmm.
trying to give people, that benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, for sure. No, for sure. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation on another that could be going back and forth
Facts.
with that on its own. And so, I think we'll leave that there, and then go on to the fourth question, which is, um, what are three words we should know in every language?
Compassion, communication, and understanding.
So, for in every language, you think a person should know how to say compassion, communicate, and understand.
They should know how to say it, and they should know how to embody those three things. They should
Mm.
know what those three things mean and why they're really important.
So go. Step into that a little further. Like, why
So
why those three words for you?
So for me, everything begins with compassion. I like to live in a world of nonviolence, and I think that nonviolence begins and it ends with compassion. So if I'm going to communicate with somebody clearly and they're going to feel me and they're going to feel safe, that only comes from a place of compassion. When I start judging and I start disconnecting, then I'm not at a compassionate place. And to me, that also connects with this understanding of like non-duality. Like me and you, we are one. And there's this saying like we're all connected. But
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a reality in that of understanding that if you are me, then why would I not want to be compassionate to you because we are the same,
Mm.
right? And so that's where that word really fully, and the embodiment of that is so important, because with compassion, that's the seed of life for everything. Every life that we all have comes from this place of compassion and love. Waking up in the day is a bold action of compassion towards ourselves.
Mm. Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting, sir. Um, so we'll jump into the fifth question as time moves on, which is uh, what scares you?
What scares me? Um, it's an interesting question because it's like there's such a difference between like what has scared you in the past and like what are you scared of at this moment. And like um trying to check in with like what.
Let's go with what scares you in the moment.
Yeah, there's definitely fear. It's not like I'm this fearless person. I'm just trying to like articulate what it is. Because I think my fears are different. It's
Well, are
God,
you equating
man.
fear and scare as the same thing?
Say it again.
Are you equating fear and scare as the same thing?
No, I mean, because I do a lot of reflection around my fear. In the work that I do, there's a lot of questions. It's like going into the darkness, like understanding my fears. Because I've in the past I've feared like death. That's been something like fearing the unknown, what happens after death. I feel like I've made peace with that. I'm at peace with just like what is will be. I think it's like something around like me not embodying my greatness. It's
Mm.
like it's like, will I live up to the potential that I know I have in myself? And even that, I like, to be honest, I'm like it's just like a little crumb of that, because I've done this self-reflection of like going to the place where I want to be and asking myself like, what am I afraid of from that place? And from that place, I've been afraid of losing it all, like
Mm.
getting what I want and then losing it all. And so I've embraced that fear, and I know that that fear comes from this place of like an internal shadow of mine of perfectionism, of like, if I don't do everything perfect, I will lose everything. And this like self-limiting belief of like, I used to live in a lot of shame. And so I'm just at the tail end of that. I can't say it's fully gone, but I would say, it's there. There's little glimpses of that. And yeah, just I'm facing it. I definitely would say I'm facing that fear.
Mm. Yeah, I've been doing I did a lot of work, or am still doing a lot of work around that the idea of perfection, right? And what that entails, and how that um is provides such a burden, right? To that the idea of perfection, and the burden that it places on someone. And
Right.
the statement that I say to myself is, um I'm not perfect. I am dynamic.
Mm.
And so with that, within that, what that does, and what that allows for me, is to take away the importance that is placed on trying to be perfect, because perfect is something that is not a tangible thing. You can't hold on to what perfect is, because
Hmm.
perfect is something different to each individual at each given time,
Exactly.
right? So it's not real,
And
and you
can I
can't get
speak
that.
to that in the
Hmm.
way that I reflect that, because I have a similar mantra, and it's everything you're, because I've dealt with a lot of shame, and it's everything you're doing is right, everything you're doing is perfect, and I take it and I retool that word perfect so that it fits me, so that it's
Hmm.
like, if I'm doing it, it is perfect. If you are doing it, you are perfect. Like, it's this self-limiting belief that, oh, I made this mistake, I'm not perfect. And it's just like, well, what if that is perfection? What if your mistakes are a part of your perfection?
And
And what
see,
if you,
oh no, go ahead, finish your thought.
I think that there's, and a lot of it comes back to these like old religious beliefs, like we are born as sinners, and it's just, I've grown up with many different belief systems presented to me. Let's just say that. Like I said,
Hmm.
my grandmother was Jewish, my mother's Jewish, my father's more on the Christian side. I've studied Taoism and different Zen philosophy. So it's just like really tapping into what feels right to me, and that doesn't feel right to me. What feels right to me is all of us embodying our perfection, and all of us being um, perfect beings as we are, and just retooling that for myself. And I understand that might be a retooling of the word, but that feels more true to me than we are all sinners.
And yeah, and see, so that's why I replace, in what you're saying, I replace that word perfection with dynamism or dynamic,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Because the word dynamic means to add power to something,
Mm.
right? And
Hmm.
so, since we all have the ability to add power to something, that's where that's how I, erase that word, erase the burden that is placed on that word, and the power that is given to that word in a, in a negative connotation, as it applies to me and what it is I'm doing at that particular time, right?
Hmm.
Even to the doing this podcast right now at this particular moment, and what's going on within it, and how we're looking and all of that. It's like constantly a retooling of me saying like, "Yo, I'm dynamic. I'm dynamic. I'm keeping this. We're going to keep this conversation dynamic and keep adding the power to it, so that way it's felt from that manner, as opposed to focusing on like, damn, this is, I got to move this screen here, or this isn't showing up here, right?
Hmm.
And so, with that, we will we will hold that conversation there in the ingredients of that perfection is something that can provide a limiting belief in oneself. And
Hmm.
when we take the power and retool it or repurpose it, that's how we give ourselves back the power to allow things to be as they are, and still
Mm.
use it for our growth, and moving forward, and
Hmm.
being and feeling good about
Hmm.
ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
And so with that, we come up with the sixth question, which is, what makes you happy?
I love that question. And I'm actually gonna like tail end to the back where we were on the back side of the last question, where it's like thinking about perfection and like making it work for us, and like that word being challenging, and I think creating shame, and creating, like I was saying, this concept of like, did I do it right? Oh, I did it wrong. Oh, did I do it right? Like, in growing up in this Western world in America, I see the way that we learn is linear, right? So the way that we learn in a linear way is we learn things like the ABCs, right? You learn your ABCs first, then you can learn how to speak, right? And it's kind of like, or not really speak, you learn how to speak, but then you can learn how to spell words. It's like you can't learn how to spell words until you learn the ABCs. Then you can
Mm-hmm.
read, then you can write, right? Same thing with math. It's like you got to learn your numbers, then you can start adding, then you can start multiplying. And so everything is done in this linear, first grade through 10th grade. Now you go to college, and I'm getting to the answer of like what is happiness and what does all that mean. It's about understanding what you want, right? So this concept of perfectionism and us retooling it, like we can retool any word in any way, and at the end of the day, the goal is to get the life that you want for yourself.
Mm.
Period. Right? And so I think that's what happiness means, and to me the ultimate form of intelligence is the ability to be happy. It's not necessarily your ability to make a bunch of money, because there's a lot of people who I know, and I'm sure many people know, that make a lot of money and they're not happy people. And so what does that mean? And so to me, the goal of life is to be happy.
Mm.
And I'm willing, and I retool anything I need to do in order to create that realm where I'm finding joy and I'm finding happiness. And because I look at the world in this compassionate way, a lot of that isn't just about me. I find like you've seen me doing the work and supporting other men and other women. That brings me extreme joy and happiness, because
Mm.
I know I'm, like I said, you are me, I am you. So as I'm going through my challenges and I'm supporting myself and I'm watching other people overcome obstacles, that gives me joy, right? And so there's such an interconnectivity in me looking for happiness in myself and also providing happiness for other people.
Mm. Okay. So being amongst the people and working with the people and doing for the people is what provides you happiness.
Well,
In
but
a, in
I
a,
want to say that in a very honest way. It's it's done through a selfish lens. Like
mm-hmm.
I am here to serve myself, like, and I'm not like bashful about that. Like I'm here and serving Enrico Moses. Like I don't wake up Himyo, so I can't think through the lens of like, let me give you what makes you happy. I can't ever satisfy that. If I lived with you, if you were my best friend, I wouldn't be able to do that, right? I
Mm.
would never be able to make you happy every day. All I can do is really search inside with myself and see what are the things that brings me joy, and then give myself that. And along the path, there's going to be so many other people that I'm going to be embodying my greatness. So by the time I show up, I can be present. I can really be there to give, because I'm not at a place of lack.
It's funny, right? Because I also did a build on this, like between selfish versus selfishness, right, or selfless, right, and just like how confusing that can be, right? Because that last part of the word, that ish, right, means to be like something, right? And then if you look at selfless, right, it means to be less than, or that part of that word means to be less than, right? So it's like when people talk about being selfish, right, or you shouldn't be selfish, right? That means like you shouldn't be yourself, or you shouldn't be serving yourself. You shouldn't be like yourself, right?
It's
And so it's
confusing.
like that, yeah. So you can go into the world like, what? What? I should be selfless. I should be less. I should be less than myself in these situations by allowing this other person, or the other thing that is on the other side of that ish, or that less. You know what I mean? By being acquiescing to that.
Yeah. And I would just
Look
say,
how confusing
ask
that.
yourself, who is telling you to do that? Like when that happens, stop and ask, like, who is telling me to not care about myself and to not give me love? Like, where
Mm-hmm.
is that coming from? What power dynamic, and what do they benefit out of that? And how are they possibly unconscious in the way that they're asking me to not care about myself? Because maybe they're doing that to themselves and they're projecting that onto me because they're
Mm-hmm.
not being self-loving. So
Mm-hmm.
just, instead of, and just really dialing it in and like what's going on. That goes back to that word of understanding. Why that word is so important to me, because in every situation, if we seek understanding, then we're in control.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the woke community, it's overstand, because I ain't gonna
Overstand,
be under nothing.
understand, be
Just stand,
stand.
right? You know what I'm saying? Just stand in
Yeah,
your place and take it
yeah.
on. So that's gonna move us into our seventh question, which is, what is your, oh my gosh, what is your purpose?
So my purpose and my mission is I co-create a world of culture, vitality, abundance, and love through embodying my greatness and supporting my community to embody their greatness.
Mm. So your purpose is towards allowing and assisting and supporting yourself and others towards greatness.
Well, and I'll say the
Staying
first part of
aligned.
that is so important because it's about co-creating, right? So I'm on this
Co-creating.
call with you, right? I'm co-creating with you. You know, like I'm not doing this by myself, you know, and I'm in this world with other people. You know,
Oh,
I don't care to do things by myself on an island. You know, like I'm here to have a family with my family and, you know, to be a part of communities with my community. So it's like to co-create is so important. And to create a place of culture is, you know, that's like going back to like the fashion designer in me and the musician and the DJ, and the person that loves events and restaurants and eating and just, you know, co-creating that is such a big part of what I do. And being in a place of vitality, I think that's like is so important to be in this youthful place of like vitality and to be tapping into abundance. So yeah, those are kind of like the co-creation aspects of like embodying my greatness. Oh, I lost you. What happened?
yeah. So keep going with that. Yeah. So with that, I mean, and serving your purpose and allowing yourself to co-create and serve that purpose. Um, I think is why we are working together, especially when it comes to King's Conscious and um, allowing ourselves or putting ourselves in a position to help young African American males um, and people of color to show up, and for us to show up for them. You know what I mean? To be able to provide them with these examples in real
Mm-hmm.
life. Not saying that they may not have, some may already have those, and look at alternate ways to continue to express that. And
Mm-hmm.
that is why I know that. Well, I'll say for myself, that is why I'm showing up at in King's Conscious and
Mm-hmm.
putting myself out there to show another, just to show another way for those who may not have known a way, and for those who may not have someone in the position to show them a way. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the same. You know, and I'm just grateful to you and grateful to Shelly, who, you know, got the ball rolling and, you know, all the men who have been involved. I was just telling Mary this morning of just how it's been such a powerful experience for me, each step of the way and witnessing all the healing that's been going on and being involved as a participant, as a leader. It's been a blessing to me.
Mm. Word, word, word. And so with that, I would like to thank you for coming on the human experience and choosing to compassionately express yourself in this manner. It is
Yes.
greatly appreciated and greatly necessary. It is necessary. It's necessary for us to be doing this
Yeah,
in that
brother.
manner.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, like, I really respect you as the man that you are and the work that you do. And every time we get together, I resonate with the embodiment of your spirit and of your heart and what you're doing here on this planet, you know, and just what you're doing in your own life, in the way you show up for your family and the way you show up for yourself and the way that you're constantly looking to dive a little bit deeper and then share that with the world. It's nothing but a blessing, and I'm really grateful for continuing to walk this path next to you.
Word, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate that. Um, So, world, thank you all so much for joining us on this wonderful journey towards Enrico Moses expressing his compassion, so that you all can experience the compassion that resides within this beautiful soul. And so tune in. We will be coming to you live with the Human Experience, Compassion in Action, every other week. And this particular series is geared towards the organization that we're involved with, called King's Conscious, and what we are going to be doing in August by providing a transformational experience for African American boys and men, and coming together in August. And so this series is based on the men who are choosing to step up and step out to be there for our young men, and in our community, which we know is so needed in this world.
Indeed.
So we're choosing to step up and step out, and so with that being said, thank you all for joining us, and we
And
shall
yo,
see you
yo, could
soon.
I give them a shout out as far as where people can find me?
Oh, you certainly can, sir. My bad.
No, you good, you good. Well, I just want to let people know, if you're connecting to the message, definitely follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Enrico Moses, Enrico Moses, and follow the company Zen House at zenhouse.la, and you can check out the website zenhouse.la. We have a component that is specifically for Black men and Black women, for people of color, called Healing Noir, and you can check that out at Instagram at Healing Noir. We're holding circles on a monthly basis, and we would love to have you connect, learn, and grow with our community.
That's what's up. And we'll also be posting that in the links,
Dope,
following us to
dope.
be for join the replay. So with that being said, thank you, and see you soon.
Thanks, y'all.
This
Peace
has
and
been the
love.
Human Experience.